Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Now I can.
Yes.
I'm glad. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Erie. My name is Kristina Church, and I am pleased and privileged to be the minister of this wonderful congregation. And we traditionally begin our Zoom services with the lovely cacophony of the bells calling us to our service. So if you are ready, please unmute yourself and we will hear the bells calling us to join together this morning. And to further welcome us into this circle, Howard and Janet will now perform the welcoming song that we sing.
Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whoever you are, we welcome you. Wherever you come from, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you. Whomever you love, we welcome you.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that we have Reverend Sunshine Wolfe from the Central Eastern Regional Group of the UUA with us today. And Reverend Sunshine is going to read our opening words, which are by Octavia Butler from the Parable of the Sower.
Good morning, everyone. It is a joy to be back with you again. And some of you may remember when I preached last, which I think was last fall, we talked about Octavia Butler, and I even read this reading at that time. And somehow it just still feels relevant, and you'll understand why. Octavia writes, "All that you touch changes. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change, and don't we know it? God is change." So many people.
And now our own James Pearson will share a prelude with us, Minuet by Johann Sebastian Bach. Thank you so much, James. Now is the time in our service when we light our chalice. And if you have a chalice or a candle, I invite you to light yours as I share these chalice lighting words. And you may, if you're muted, you may also say the chalice lighting words with me. This is from a haiku that a friend of mine, Elaine Johnson, wrote recently, and I thought it related well to our theme today. Holy human love, holy human we become, whole and part as one. And we light this chalice today in celebration of our sacred humanity as individuals and as congregations. As we do so, we honor the spark of divinity that exists in everyone, even as each of us remains fully and wholly human. And we affirm that each one of us is whole and holy, even as each remains fully and wholly human, exactly as we are. And our chalice is lit. And now it is the tradition of this congregation to invite the children to share the children's bond of union. This is my first time doing it, so please forgive me if I'm a little bit still learning how we do this. And this is how we say it, and I invite you to say it with me. We, guess I missed a word there. We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open mind, loving heart, and welcoming hands. So welcome. And now we will recite together the bond of union of this congregation, adopted in 1898 and used continuously since then. We unite ourselves together for the study and practice of morality and religion, as interpreted by the growing thought and noblest lives of humanity, believing that we may thereby prove helpful to one another and promote the cause of truth, righteousness, and love in the world. And we have an anthem today. We'll be sharing a video. It's a song called Love Rescue Me from the Omagh Community Youth Choir in Ireland.
Love, rescue me. Come forth and speak to me. Raise me up and don't let me fall. No man is my enemy. My own hands imprison me. I said, love, rescue me.
Many strangers have I met on the road to my regret. Many lost who seek to find themselves in me. They asked me to
10 years ago, my town suffered a terrible terrorist atrocity, and 29 people and 2 unborn babies lost their lives. Many more, hundreds, were injured, and I suppose that was as a direct result of the problems that Ireland has suffered for hundreds of years. And there has been a divide in our country which has unsettled the nation for, as I say, such a long time. And I decided that soon after this atrocity that I would try and bring people closer together. And my main thought was to work with young people specifically, because they're the leaders of tomorrow. They're the people who can actually make change. So I set up a youth choir to bring both Protestant and Catholic kids together to share music and to learn about each other, and just to raise a positive awareness of the great feeling that music can give to people. It's a great source of healing, a great source of comfort, especially when times are hard. And it's quite noticeable. I mean, at the minute the world's gone through serious economic changes. People are a little bit uncertain about their future. But the one thing that we can kind of relate to is what music can do for us. And it's interesting that nearly all religion has used music to help uplift people. But I think that really that's what music can do. Music is such a universal.
Beautiful and inspiring. Now, Sunshine, Reverend Sunshine will share the time for all ages with us this morning.
So this story is a story about a teacher named Sophia. And Sophia was that teacher. You know, that teacher that many of you had, and who really kind of inspired you and encouraged you to do great things. Not maybe all of us had it, but most of us did it. Sophia was that teacher, that person who just inspired everybody. And she had been teaching for a really long time. So long that her kids in her early classes had now grown up, and their kids were going to her classes now. And everybody in the town knew her because she was loved and she had done so much. Now, Sophia was getting ready for work the next day like she always does, though a little more trying these days than perhaps other times. So she's stressed out and thinking about all the things she has to get done. And next thing she notices is that she gets a zzz from her cell phone. And she looks at it. And the message says, "Dear Sophia, I will be around tomorrow. I wonder if I might stop by your house for tea tomorrow afternoon. Your friend, God." Now I want you to imagine that you get a text message from God. As you might imagine, Sophia at first thought maybe this is a joke, because really would God send her a text message? And you know, I know some of you are like, it'd be really amazing because I don't believe in God at all. So that would just be downright miraculous, right? But Sophia's Jewish, and it was, you know, definitely something that she believed was a possibility. And she started to worry that, well, if it wasn't a joke, it wasn't very funny, first off. And second off, she couldn't think of anybody who would do that. So she started to wonder, well, what if it's true? So she went to sleep. She woke up the next morning and she's, well, if it is true, maybe I should just act like it's going to happen. And then we'll see how it goes. And so on her way to work, she stops at the store and buys a giant mat that says "Welcome" in giant bold letters, hard to miss, to put in front of her door. And after work, she gets home and she does the thing one might imagine one does. Anybody guess what you would do if God was about to show up to your house? That's right. You clean every inch of that house within an inch of its life, right? Cleans everything. It's like she polishes the cat, puts a bow on it. Everything looks perfect. And then she goes to the store and she starts to buy food for the party, which is going to be that evening. And she's trying to think of all of the things that God might want. And she's like, well, certainly tea, but she doesn't know if God likes hot tea or cold tea. So she decides to make both. And then it occurs to her, maybe God doesn't like tea at all. So she makes a whole bunch of lemonade. And then she starts, she buys all the stuff and bakes some bread. She makes some cookies. She makes casserole, fruit salad, sandwiches. If you can think of it, she made it, because who knows what God really likes. Well, as she's going about cooking, she hears a at the door, and she opens it thinking it's going to be God, and no, it's the mayor of the town. And the mayor has smelled the thoroughly delicious bread and asks if he can come in. And she says, oh yes, totally, please come in. In fact, I'm having a very special guest soon and I'd love for you to meet them. And yeah, so come on in. So she gives them some bread and she continues cooking, and she's working on the cookies when she hears another at the door. And there in front of the door is a bunch of the students in her class. And they said, we smelled the most wonderful cookies and we wondered if we could come inside and have some. And she says, yes, of course. I'm about to have this most amazing guest. Please come in. I'd love for you to meet them. And so they have some cookies. The kids start telling the mayor how he can be improving the town and doing things better, because what else do you do to a politician who's just sitting there eating bread? And, she goes about cooking other things. And then she hears another at the door, and there is the entire group from her women's covenant group at church. And they have smelled all the wonderful food, heard the laughter and conversation inside, and wondering if she's having a party. And she says, oh yes, I'm about to have this most amazing guest. Please come in, enjoy, have food, enjoy all the drinks, everything. And so they start to have this raucous party. Like, people keep showing up at the door, the house fills up, both stories, first floor, second floor, the backyard, the front yard. People are telling stories, playing games, playing music. They start to experiment with the idea that maybe you could put the tea and the lemonade together, because that's not an idea that was thought of before. And they start to have all of this fun, right? And everybody has a beautiful, amazing day. They go home. And Sophia, goes about cleaning the house and just thinking about what a wonderful, powerful day it was. And she goes to bed, and she wakes up the next morning and she realizes something. Anybody guess what it was? She's like, wait a minute. Why didn't God show up? God said that they were coming. Why didn't they show up? And not too long after she has that thought, she gets another zzz on her phone. And it says, I had such a wonderful time yesterday. The bread was delicious. The cookies were divine. Tea mixed with lemonade is my very favorite. Thank you for being such a wonderful host. I hope we can do it again soon. Love, God. And of course, the question is, when did God show up? It's very much a part of our Unitarian Universalist faith to believe that God is not something that's above or outside. It is in us. And whether you believe in God as an entity that's somehow separate, or you believe in physics, the basic notion is that it is the miracle of all of us together in community that helps bring love and hope and wonder. And so God showed up in each of the people who were there that day. God showed up in Sophia's care for her neighbors and her openness of her house and all the things that she did. So may we hold the spirit of love that is God, love that is humanity, love that is this powerful earth. So may it be.
Thank you, Sunshine. And we have an opportunity today to practice love in action, because we are trying something new with our service, with our online service, which is an offertory. So we have the treat of hearing the wonderful James Pearson perform another piece for us. And we have the opportunity to practice generosity for this community and for those who are in need. I encourage you during this time, if you can, and if you're able, to write a check as an offering to our congregation and to those that it serves and helps. And address will be up on your screen to make it easier for you to do. Thank you. Beautiful, thank you. Yesterday was a wonderful experience of having a ministerial startup workshop that many of you attended. And we talked a lot about how we want to be together in the future and how we envision living into wholeness in this community. So we're going to go into a portion of our time where Reverend Sunshine and I will share with you some of the things we talked about yesterday. And we have a wonderful reading from Reverend Teresa Soto that sort of speaks to a lot of the themes that we talked about yesterday.
And some of you heard this poem if you were at the workshop yesterday, but it's one of those kinds of poems that I think it's good to hear it a couple of times. If you've ever heard of Lectio Divina, it's a practice of reading something 3 times over and over again and learning something new each time. So bear with me. This is called Remembering the Future by Reverend Teresa Soto, and I put the name of the book in the chat for anybody interested. They write, "Can we develop the skill of remembering the future? Can we commit to build the community that will extend into time, that we only know by memory because it will outlast us? Memorize the compass points of the day yet to come, the truth, the love, the fire, the endless yes of the horizon. Shake the scales from your imagination, reach, stretch, rise. There is no more time for pretending that everything can be all right without your care, without your attention. You can mourn. Grief will be being more real at times than the promise of the sunrise, more real than the peace of the moon that by inconstant silver turns, disappears. And yet, while we may mourn changes, losses, deceptions, and betrayals, beneath the ash, we find an ember. We weep, and then, as we have learned from labor movements, we organize. Remember the day toward which we gather, the tomorrow toward which we advance. It is with your actions today that you engage that muscle memory, that sense of smell, the ragged velvet feel of a day that you have never lived. It is also your day. Remember it well." So yesterday we gathered, and today we wanted to share a conversation between Reverend Kristina and I about some of the questions that are very live at the beginning of a new ministry, and certainly some of the challenges that congregations are facing today, from Reverend Kristina's experience serving churches and my own experience serving in the field staff role for the UUA. And so I also want to lift up that this is very close and near and dear to me because you were one of my first startups a year and a half ago with a different minister. And so it's interesting this time because I feel like we're going a little deeper. At least I think we did yesterday, and I hope we continue to do so. So it's been a great opportunity. But we had a series of questions that we thought we'd chat about. And the first question actually goes to Reverend Kristina. As the new minister in this congregation, this startup is for you and this congregation to start well together. My question to you is, what excited you about the possibility of serving Erie?
Well, I think that what first caught my attention about the Erie congregation is just that I think the city of Erie has some shared commonalities with the city of Buffalo. And so I thought, you know, I live on Lake Erie, on the eastern shores of Lake Erie, and I live in a Rust Belt city that is in some ways struggling, but is in some ways a very vibrant and friendly, caring place, and kind of a hidden gem. And as I began to talk to the folks on the ministerial search committee, I confirmed my impressions that, you know, Erie and Buffalo have a lot in common, and maybe the two congregations would have a lot in common too. And I also, as I started to get to know people a little more on the committee, I realized they were looking for someone who, I don't know if they really came out and said it, but I just had a kind of a sense they were looking for someone who would be relational and who would, you know, really care about them. And I think that's one of my strengths. And so I just felt like a certain kind of simpatico, synchronicity or something. I just felt like this could work. And it's hard to define it sometimes, but that was really what first got my attention, was really kind of proximity and commonality. But as we got deeper into the process, there was certainly something else there too. Shared aspirations, and I just felt a kind of a down-to-earth quality about the folks that I was getting to know. And that felt also very comfortable for me. Nobody was putting on any airs or anything, and we could laugh together. So yeah, it just felt good. And it continues to unfold in that way for me. So I'm really glad to be here. I'm so glad to be serving all of you, and I hope you can feel that.
Zoom and all.
Zoom and all. We're doing it. We're getting to know each other. We're forging those relationships.
Great.
And I wanted to ask you, Sunshine, because yesterday we talked about many things, and the people who were there at the workshop shared through this really cool technology that Reverend Sunshine brought us called Mentimeter, Mentimeter.com, right? And it's like a polling software that you can just quickly ask people questions and then put up graphs and things. And so we saw a graph of how long folks had been members of the congregation. And it was really interesting because there was like, I think it was 0 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, and then 10 to 20 years, and more than 20. And so there was like one person in the 0 to 5, one person in the 5 to 10, and then whoo, 10 to 20 was like this huge, huge bar graph. And then I think there wasn't anybody, or maybe there was somebody, like just a few people after that in longer than 20 years. So that 10 to 20 years section was just, you know, the center of the bell curve, we might say. So I wondered, you mentioned yesterday, Reverend Sunshine, that that's a little bit unusual. You haven't seen that kind of a distribution before. And I wondered, what do you think that says about the congregation, or how does that affect congregational relations and how we tend to be together?
Well, there are a very small handful of congregations, I think, who probably have members who've been, mostly members who've been 20 plus. It's not a lot. We typically see turnover in congregations about every 5 years. So half of the people who are in the pews now were not in the pews 5 years ago, right? Some congregations that skews 10. I think that must skew even higher for your congregation. And what I note about congregations that have folks who have been members for such long times is, one is they have a great gift of a sense of family. Like, you all know each other well, you've done a lot of things over and over, there's a lot of great connection and power and wonder. And I always get the sense that in communities where that's the case, there's a get the job done feel. You know, like, we know how to do this, we're just going to keep kind of doing the things we've done and kind of, you know, have a strong sense of how to make things happen together, because you all know each other well, you know your strengths, your weaknesses. There's challenges though, right, with any community in any size. I could do a different spiel for communities that have almost entirely new members, because they have their own gifts and their own challenges, right? But the challenges I see for congregations that have mostly members who have been in 20 plus years is that it's really hard for new people to come in. And if they come in and they have ideas different than how the community has been doing things, they're probably not going to stay. And that has its challenges, not the least of which is that what happens when those members who have been around for such a long time are no longer with us. How do we repopulate if we don't have the capacity to kind of bring in new people, right? Now, some of that is the change of how church is happening, right? We are seeing a significant drop in the number of people attending churches. But what's interesting is we're seeing one particular thing. Either we're seeing churches really kind of drop off, and in fact, we had a church in Ohio close this year because they really didn't want to engage with technology, right? They were like, we want no part of that. And they realized that to succeed, they would have to. And they said, you know, we're good. And that's okay. Like, if you're a community that decides you want to do that, that's fine. But what we have also seen is congregations get near that endpoint and then engage in a transformation process. And then tons of new people come in, because what we see in congregations that are near the end of their community time is they find a passion, something that they deeply care about, and they just put all of their energy into that one thing. And what's interesting is people like to join passion. They don't, how many of you joined this congregation so you could give it money? How many of you joined this congregation so you could volunteer? Put on the garage sale? Anyone? Work in the kitchen? How many of you signed up for this congregation because you wanted to be an usher? You get my point, right? Like, we don't sign up because of the tasks of the church. That's just a part of being a community. We sign up because of family and community, certainly, but also because there's a sense of direction. And particularly in younger communities, there's a distrust of institutions. They need to see that what they're joining is having an impact in the world, is making a difference. So what I see for challenges for congregations where it's, you know, you have a lot of folks who've been members for a really long time, and that's the strongest cohort, is to really think about the ways in which you can let newer people come in, do it their own way, along with your way. Like, you don't have to give up your way of doing things, but along with your way. And also, and this is, I think, the hardest one that I see, is to let them fail a little. So for example, my last congregation that I served, somebody said, well, I would like to run a book drive. Well, they had run book drives in the past and it had never really worked. And so a number of folks, oh, you can't do that, that's not going to work. And the person, being rather stubborn, which is one of the ways you can join into communities or establish, is by being stubborn, decided to do it anyway. But because she had some new technological skills and she had some different relationships in the community than were already established in the congregation, it succeeded where it had never succeeded before. But if the congregation had kept insisting that she can't do a thing because it had always been that way, it wouldn't have gone forward. So Celebrating the gifts, I think, of a 20+ year membership and a community that has that is, you know, that great power and connection and care for each other that is absolutely evident. And then living into the letting new people come in and try something new and different and maybe even uncomfortable and uncertain, so that you can kind of create the next generation of people who will carry on the legacy of this amazing community. Yeah. So did you have anything you wanted to add to that, Kristina? You don't
I
have
think
to.
you said it very well.
Okay, great. Well, then I got a question for you. Yesterday, we were talking about a lot of the challenges that this congregation has had with ministers over the years. That there have been a lot of good things, but there also been times of challenge and even conflict and uncertainty and illness and all kinds of things going on. And I shared the story that I met with the board last year, and we looked at all the pictures of the ministers on the wall in the library there. And I asked actually it was the board and the transitions team, and I asked them to go through and tell me about all the ministers they remembered. And then I asked them which ones were the ones that they thought had the greatest, you know, did the best job as minister. And the two that they lifted up, they started telling the story of these folks. And what came across wasn't so much what each of those people did. Like, it wasn't that they preached well. It wasn't that they went out in the community. It wasn't their social justice work. It's that those ministers really loved the congregation and showed up for them and cared about the individual members. And I actually remember somebody saying, and you know, that's a quality of Erie too, of the city, that people like to have connection and love each other and kind of care for one another. So I guess my question is thinking about that. And one of my responses was, it sounds like you need to have a minister who knows that, you know, loves you. So my question for you is, what does loving the congregation mean to you? What does that look like for you?
Well, I think that's yet another commonality between Erie and Buffalo, because we call Buffalo the city of good neighbors. And what that means for me is that we're all in relationship with one another. And it might be someone that I don't even know who digs me out of a snowbank one day. And that has happened to me here in this town. And it means that that interdependent web that we talk about in Unitarian Universalism is real for us because we're all in relationship. So for me, I need to pull on those threads a little bit. And I've been trying to reach out to people and get to know people in different ways because of the way that we are all separated right now by this pandemic. But I see that as my primary task, my primary process as your minister, which is to get to know what matters to you, get to know you, and come to care for you. I think that, you know, pastoral ministry, caring for you is the foundation of everything else that I do as a minister. And it's been really easy for me to care about you because you are all so just really open to that experience and have worked with me to reach out and to share yourselves with me, even though I'm far away, and even though we have to do it over technology, and even though we have to have phone calls right now, and I can't really sit in a room with you and break bread with you and do all the things that we would normally do. But the creativity of this congregation and the openness to trying some new things during this time has really impressed me. And you know how sometimes when you go through adversity with folks, it just sort of bonds you together and makes you into a team. That's kind of how I feel right now. I feel that there's something about this time that is just, you know, creating that bond between us right now. And certainly, I hope we'd be able to do it during non-pandemic times just as well. But it's it's an opportunity, you know, to experience this together, a great something that we are going through, to hold each other up and to come to care for each other. And I feel it happening.
Wonderful.
So Sunshine, I guess I've got the next question. And I want to ask you, yesterday you talked about how it was important to show love for the minister.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, you know, what does the congregation showing their love to the minister, how does that, what do you think that looks like?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was saying that, you know, it's important that the congregation feel that the minister loves them, but also it's important that the minister feels love from the congregation. And of course, I mean a healthy, well-boundaried professional love, right? So there's always that component of
Absolutely.
you know, making sure that we're being clear that you're in a professional role. So it doesn't mean you can necessarily become friends, well,
Right.
friendly, but friends with everyone in the congregation, things like that. What it does mean is that the congregation cares about your health, your well-being, fostering a space that gives you capacity to give your best ministry. One of the things that we've been really advocating for, and actually, let me say this. The other thing is, I think that a congregation's capacity to show that love towards a minister also is their capacity to show that love for all of their leaders, both lay leaders and professional leaders and staff, right? So one of the things we've talked about of late is, particularly in COVID, that people take more time off, more retreat time, more time away from screens and things. So I've actually encouraged boards of trustees to say, we're taking 2 weeks off as a board, you know, unless it's an emergency, we won't get back to you until such and such a time, because even our lay leaders need some of that space, right? For ministers, I think it means making sure that you're getting your retreat time, particularly serving 2 congregations, right? I can't imagine trying to figure out all of the scheduling you have to do and remembering everybody in both congregations and trying to differentiate all the challenges between the 2, because they're unique and they're in different parts of the state, right? So retreat time gives you that space. But the other thing, and this is really, really important, part of what the congregation pays you to do is navel gaze. They pay you to gaze at your navel or look at the clouds, or take the time and space that allows you to create the inspirational sermons, to create the inspirational words, right? And because of the online technology, it takes more and more time to prepare for worship, right? So what might have been, say, a 10-hour-a-week process now can easily take up half your week. And that's in a full-time ministry, right? So making sure that there's downtime space so that you can be that reflective, present, compassionate person. Part of it is making sure that when there's feedback to be given, that it isn't just given en masse. So if I don't remember exactly how many members of your church are, but let's say there's 50 people on this call. 50 people have an opinion on some major decision that you've made or something you've decided to share. If all 50 people come at you with feedback, talk about overwhelming, right? Have any of you experienced that? I've certainly experienced with this congregation. Some of you remember at the last startup, there was a moment where somebody had given an idea and like immediately 3 people told them why it wouldn't work. And that was just in a meeting setting in one space. You imagine that happening with all 50 people at once going at your ministry, it gets exhausting. So making sure that you ask if it's okay to give feedback. Not to say that you can never give feedback, but asking, is it okay to give feedback now? And if not now, when, right? And then giving feedback in a healthy way so that you're not overwhelming the person. But then the other part, and this one I think is particularly challenging in COVID, because things are so overwhelming right now, it can be easy to forget to give the good word, the gratitude word, the thing that's encouraging, and particularly in these stressful times, is actually some of the lifeblood of being able to survive in this world, which is, you know, that was a great sermon, or even if you didn't like the entire worship service, that was a beautiful chalice lighting, or, you know, just one thing that brings joy or says yes. That is in and of itself an act of love, of encouragement and support and care. Checking in and just saying, hey, how are you doing? Every once in a while. Hopefully the minister does that, but you can do that too. And I'll share one that comes from a colleague, which was a great ask in caring for your ministry. He said, don't ever loan books, give them. Because a loaned book will never get read and will always be owed back. A given book will be there when it's needed. So throw that out there as a thing. But all of it is an attitude of care that's well boundaried and respects that there are certain things that a minister can't talk to you about and can't get into you with. And then the other piece is just really showing gratitude whenever possible, because there will be plenty of times when you don't like what's happening, and it's really easy to focus on what isn't working rather than what is. And honestly, in the overwhelm of this day and age, oftentimes all we're hearing is the negative. So all the positive you can give to each other and to your leaders and to your minister, the better it will be. That's what I got. Which leads to our final question. This one's for the both of us. We all know that there are challenges right now, and it's brought a lot of challenges and unique things to our congregations. What are some of the opportunities and gifts that it has brought? So thinking in that gratitude space. So Reverend Kristina, what do you think are some of the opportunities and gifts that the pandemic and these trying times have brought to us?
Well, I think that the online services, particularly here at UU Erie, have really given a lot of people an opportunity to be a part of, you know, the cast of thousands that puts this on every week. So, you know, having so many roles for people, and this congregation has done a great job of, you know, not overwhelming any one person, although certainly Kelly Armour deserves a shout out for what she does for the Sunday services every week. But, you know, helping to distribute that work amongst the congregation, which is wonderful. I think too that there have been folks who have been able to circle back to UU Erie during this time, who moved away from the town, but are now able to attend the services, you know, from a long distance via Zoom. And it's been so lovely to get to know some of those folks. And I think some of them are here today. So people coming from Colorado and New Mexico and all kinds of places. And they are back with their beloved communities. So that's a really beautiful gift that I think we're all grateful for. What about you, Reverend Sunshine? What do you see in this time as a blessing?
Oh, it's been really powerful to watch how congregations have come together, started working together in some ways. So for example, in the Pittsburgh cluster, 6 of the smaller communities, I think the largest one is 80 people, the smallest is 10. UU communities in that area do what's called common worship. And so each week, one of them takes responsibility for the worship service. And everybody joins together and then goes off into their own congregation's coffee hour. But it's a way that's reduced the amount of time that such small communities, and I think only one of them has a minister right now who's very part-time, has been able to put that energy into other things that they want to work on, so they're not needing to keep creating worship every single week. And they've been able to invite guest speakers from, you know, other congregations. That's another thing that I think has been so amazing, is because of this online format, we have California preachers preaching in places like Pennsylvania and Ohio, and places that they would never normally be able to, because that's a flight and a hotel and all of the money that goes into that. And I really encourage you to take opportunity. There's been a list created by the Ministers Association of people who are willing to preach. in other congregations. And so I remember one of my colleagues in New Jersey was so excited because for the summer series, every person who was speaking were rock star Unitarian Universalists from historically marginalized locations. So transgender ministers, ministers living with disabilities, ministers of color, people that they would normally never see. And they got an entire 8 weeks of that. And the congregation found it powerful. We also have a couple of congregations that are, they're visiting other churches, so they'll attend. So the Smithton congregation this week is visiting one of our congregations in Minneapolis as a group. They're all attending that service and then going to their coffee hour afterwards. And we have another congregation, they did All Souls in DC one week, they did Dallas one week, they're doing Portland, and they're just checking out all these different ways of doing worship so that they learn. So there's just been this really kind of cross-pollination. And here in the area, we've had a really hard time with religious education. By the way, religious educators deserve all the hugs in the world right now. It's a hard time. And in part because parents are like, I'm still trying to figure out how to get my kids to do school, and you want me to show up for religious education? No. So a number of our churches have actually said we're not starting religious education until October or November to give parents time to figure that out. They're starting to do like quarterly activities. But the other cool thing is we had a congregation who had only one kid in the kindergarten to second grade category, and another congregation that only had one kiddo in the coming of age category. And so they're sending the kids to the opposite congregations with a volunteer to help out. And so they're able to continue with their religious education, even though they don't have all the people they need. And so we're seeing these really cool creative things. The other thing is folks are finding fun ways of connecting. And the final story I'll share comes from our congregation, North Royalton, which is just south of Cleveland. The religious educator there, she knew they have a brand new building that they love. And I think they miss the building. I mean, they miss each other, but they miss each other in that building because they put so much energy into it. And so she did what's called a stuffy conference, where people registered their stuffed animals for a con at the church. They had 20 stuffed animals register for this conference. 3 of them belonged to children. Okay, so there are 17 stuffed animals that were part of families of adult-only households attending this conference. And they dropped their stuffed animals at the very front. There were 2 stuffed animals that everybody knows from the nursery who were doing the registration. They all got name tags. You know, they had coffee hour together. They took classes. They did projects. And I love the religious educator, Jenny. She said, you know, I couldn't decide if it was disconcerting or awesome that I would spend entire hours just talking to stuffed animals or not, right? But the other piece that happened was they were displaying this on Facebook and on, you know, their personal church group. Folks started to get into these really meaningful theological conversations. Like one of the sections, one of the stuffed animals says, well, what's that? And it's a Black Lives Matter sign that the children had created for their religious education wing. And as they were answering questions about what does Black Lives Matter mean and all this stuff for the stuffies in the little photo series, it led to a conversation in the congregation, well, why don't we hang a Black Lives Matter banner? Which is something they've been kind of avoiding for a little while, but this really brought it up in a safe and meaningful and fun way. And so now they're having these conversations they wouldn't have had before without this particular experience. So we're seeing really creative, fun ways for people to have community and be connected. And that I find inspiring. The last thing I'll say is that this time has really highlighted the number of people who this is the only format they can attend church. That we have entire communities that as much as we may feel this isolation, we have many people in our communities that that's their everyday life. And that as much as I think we want to be together and be in each other's physical presence, I certainly hope we don't lose this, because we have so many people who have found connection in this time that for them, the end of the pandemic will mean that disconnection coming back. And I don't want to see that for any of us. So I think we see a lot of congregations really thinking about how does this technology become a part of us rather than a thing we have to get through. Yeah, so that's what I got. So that's essentially our sermon today. This is normally, by the way, what I do for startup sermons is I have a conversation with the minister in front of the congregation, because I think it's a good way to get at some of our core questions and the things that we have to deal with. And I want to thank Kristina for being willing to engage in this free form style, because it can be anxiety producing as well as fun. And hope that at least a little bit of this is meaningful. I hope you hold the heart in the stories and the readings and even the music, that we're talking about the love of this community with and among each other, and with an eye towards the future, that it isn't just the now. And I know it can be really hard to imagine that there's a future right now. There is, I promise you there is. And so what will you be 10 years, 20 years from now, because of the love that you clearly hold here and foster amongst each other? So that's what I got.
Thank you, Reverend Sunshine. And that discussion of blessings leads us right into our section of the service where we share our joys and concerns with one another. And during the music, we invite everyone to type a few words into the chat box. And you don't have to have a joy or a sorrow. You can just type in some words about how you're feeling. You can type in something that you think is a blessing of this pandemic time, if there's something that Reverend Sunshine and I forgot to say. And please don't directly respond to anyone's individual entry. We are simply bearing witness to one another's feelings during this time. And now we'll share a moment of silence together as we consider all of these joys and concerns. Are there any folks who are calling in who would like to share a joy or concern by hitting *6 on your phones? All right, well, we had many joys and concerns expressed today from both worry and fears and schadenfreude for the experiences of our president and the health of our president. We had joys for anniversaries and for the connection of this community. Also, folks who expressed experiencing difficulty during this time of being shut in and less able to be mobile. And also appreciation for the service today, and especially for the music. And for all these joys and concerns that were expressed today, and for those that are in the silence of our hearts, we bear witness. And I'd like to just sing a little song for you now. It's hymn number 1023, Building Bridges, in the Teal hymnal. And it's supposed to be a round. And if we were together, I would love to sing it in a round, because I love to share in that kind of community expression of wholeness and fullness. So if you'd like, you could sing along with me or sing your own part while you're muted and enjoy the music. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. Building bridges between our divisions, I reach out to you. Will you reach out to me? With all of our voices and all of our visions, friends, we could make such sweet harmony. And now it is time to extinguish our chalice. So please, if you've lit one, let's go ahead and extinguish them together as I say these words. After a flame is extinguished, its image lingers in our eyes for a moment, and the room remains warmed by its heat. Our hearts are still cheered by its brightness, an imprint of the brief time burning. the alchemy of flame, wax, and air. May this brief time together today light an after image in our minds and stamp its impression on our hearts, forever shaped by this brief moment here together. Well, friends, we've come to the end of our service today. Thank you to Reverend Sunshine for being here with us and for the wonderful ministerial startup workshop that has allowed us to consider so many of these important ideas and values. And as we go forward, may we continue to care for one another. And may we offer each other peace, comfort, and compassion. May this congregation continue to develop and nurture and practice committed, creative, and connected leadership. May this community know that it is worthy of the love and care that it seeks from its leaders, and may it offer nurturing care to its leaders in return. May we all continue to grow in our understanding and our commitment to the ideals of Unitarian Universalism, allowing all of us once again to fall in love with our faith all over again. And even in these most trying of times, may we continue to love one another into wholeness. So be it, blessed be, and amen.
Kristina, you're muted.